This was the model that we created that generated this design. Hi, my name is Jason Tapia. I'm the principal of Building Center number 3. I was born and raised in New York City. I studied at Cornell University. I earned a Bachelor of Architecture from Cornell University. And then after that, I worked for 7 years in New York City, doing the kind of city slicker life, living in the Bronx, commuting into Manhattan every day. I worked for a big architecture and interior design firm called Gensler. And after 7 years, I decided to leave and to head someplace warmer. At the time, I was into motorcycles, so I wanted to go somewhere where I could ride motorcycle all year round, and this was the perfect place. We are an interdisciplinary design firm. We started the office in 2010 after completing graduate school at Massachusetts Institute of Technology. I decided at some point I needed to kind of strike out on my own. That was the time to do it because I didn't have a family. I really didn't have another job necessarily lined up. I had opportunities, but I thought now's the time to kind of bet on yourself. So I went all in. And one of the things that inspired me was my trip while I was in graduate school to India. I spent about 12 to about 3-4 months in India, living in India, in particular New Delhi. And I traveled all over the country, visiting different architects, asking them questions about sustainable design, how work is performed in their country, in their cities. And one of the funny things that they mentioned to me is that, sustainability is an American term. Like we created this term for something that they do all the time. They have no other way to work except to be sustainable because of the pressures of labor and resources in their country. And one of the things that I discovered were these 2 or 3 architects that had founded their companies in the 90s. And their companies were called building centers. And each city had its own building center. So it would be the Anandpur Building Center. It would be the Delhi Building Center. And with these building centers, the government of India had charged them with helping them solve the human settlement problem, right? People migrating from the rural economy into an urban economy. And they had issues of housing shortages, job shortages. So these architects, developers, builders, engineers were charged with helping solve that problem. And I thought that was pretty inspiring. So I wanted to create something like that in Miami when I started my own office, to create not necessarily the Miami Building Center, but a building center whose concept was founded on solving local problems with local solutions. My first challenge as an architect was really, finding clients. A lot of times architects who go out on their own, they go out on their own because they already have a client available. So a client pulls them out of a practice because they've got this great big project, and now that architect can't work part-time for this client and at the same time full-time in an office. So that's usually how people segue into it. Another way people start their own firms is, they're in academia, they're already earning a paycheck as a professor, as a faculty member, and then they go out and they look for work, but they have the security of insurance and benefits and a salary. Very rare is somebody kind of starting a practice with no clients. And that was the position that I was in. I decided that I would start my practice with my idea of building center number 3, and I had to find clients. So that was my biggest challenge. What I enjoy most about having my own practice is being able to define what are my priorities, to make sure that I'm designing and working in an office that I want to be in, right? So it's allowed me to create the type of workplace that I would want to work in. And that's important, because when you go to a firm, you have to assimilate into that firm culture. Maybe you're an introvert, or maybe you're someone who really likes to, engage people and socialize and collaborate. But that office that you landed in isn't that type of office. So I started to think about what is the kind of practice that I want to work in, and then how do I actively create that type of practice. We'll start picking different materials and showing the client our vision for the project. So these are other projects, and we show the client other projects to say, hey, this is what we could potentially do with your project. This is how the project starts. It starts by us kind of sketching and looking at it in 3 dimensions, and then we'll send it to the 3D printer. So this 3D printer will create something as big as 12 by 12 by 12. Everything that you see here, we've built ourselves with our equipment, no hand tools. Everything's done with digital equipment, where we design it in the computer, and then a machine cuts it and creates it for us. This is the CNC router. So this cuts 1-to-1 scale, so we can cut pieces of plywood. This is the equipment that cuts it. So it basically moves in the X, Y, and Z axis. This is the vacuum to suck out all of the dust. This was the model that we created that generated this design, right? So it started off very simply, and then we 3D printed that. Then we actually laser cut it, right? So if we take a look at the model, we laser cut it. All of this is done in-house. This is our laser cutter. So those smaller scale test models that you saw up there were created from this machine. The best career advice that I received has been find a mentor, find somebody who's doing the thing that you want to do and who's doing it well. I think that's important, because if you're thinking about a career in whatever it might be, you should identify somebody who's doing well in that career and talk to them and listen to their story and hear how they got there. This is a pretty big library for such a small firm as ours, but it's important to us to leave ourselves open to being inspired by the materials we have in the office.